Hey, this is the first time for me getting online, but it's important. So that's why I was like, you know what? It's time to do this. It's time to do this. But all of you that really know me know that I do historical work a lot, and I came up with a couple avenues to show you guys exactly what I found. And a lot of people are out there now with the truth, like Dane Calloway, letting people know exactly what's going on, because I found a lot of stuff myself about our family. So whenever I was doing a little bit of research, I started butting against a lot of the information that we were getting from the family reunions, saying that we're from Liberia and stuff like that. So I was like, that's not the same thing that a lot of my close family was actually saying to us. Like, for example, on my mother's side, everybody used to always talk about my grandmother's hair looking like Indian, you know. And then I also remember things that talking about her being Indian, you know, like. So when I started doing a lot of the research, stuff wasn't adding up with stuff that we were learning in the reunions. People saying that we're from Liberia and Nigeria and stuff like that. So I first started doing research with my mother during the ending of my great-grandparents' life. She ended up starting to do a camcorder recording of my grandparents, like of her grandparents, which were my great-grandparents. And she took a lot of the pictures. She was interviewing a lot of people, different stuff like that. So if it wasn't for my mom and getting me involved into this stuff, I don't know if I would be doing it as much as I do now. But with that, it opened up a lot of avenues. And plus, listening to my uncles on my father's side, my uncle, my grandmother, saying that we're Indian, you know, like they said, Blackfoot and Creek used to be the main terms I used to hear. So, as I mentioned, I did a lot of research myself. So, a few years ago, I was, we had a couple different family reunions, and then I noticed on my dad's side, on the Betton side, they were trying to link us with different families and stuff like that. So a lot of people didn't really have a lot of information. So we were at one of the reunions, and they said, well, you guys have to be on this part right here. So, okay, we're going to put you underneath these people right here. So a little bit later on, probably a couple months later, our historian, she ended up calling me up and we're like, what's your information again? Like, who's your grandfather? Like, how far can you go back and stuff like that? Which at the time, we didn't know basically what our real grandfather's name was, like our great-grandfather's name. Everyone was calling him John Frank. It turns out that his name was actually Frank. His brother's name was John, but they used to be together so much that everybody used to say John Frank all the time. So, for example, the family basically called him John Frank, and it wasn't. His name was actually Frank. And if it wasn't for my cousin directing us the proper way, then I started finding the documents. Like whenever I ended up doing like Ancestry.com, I ended up finding my grandparents, and it had Frank on there. But there stuff that happened with Frank, still that I still got to do a little research myself to see exactly what happened, because the following census showed that he was no longer with the family, that my grandmother was widowed. So I don't know exactly what happened, and I can't find his death certificate information as well too. So then later on, we ended up linking with his actual brothers and sisters and stuff like that. So we ended up getting on the right path. And then we also found out that his father they called him the Englishman because he was light-skinned and he spoke with an English accent, and he was like very, very proper apparently. And then we found out that his mom and dad, his mother was American Indian, as from what I'm understanding, that she was Cherokee, and his father was one of the plantation owners. Yeah, there was a lot of that going on. A lot of people don't realize, like, the slave trade, or like moving around different things, it costs a decent amount of money. And also, in order for the colonists to come here, they basically came here for a reason, and they wanted to make sure that they lasted here. So there was a lot of breeding with the Native Americans, like the original people that were here, so that way that they could have ties to the land. I'm just going through some bumps, sorry about that. And that's basically what happened. So he was a product of that. Now, she ended up having land that she ended up having later on after he had passed, meaning the landowner that they were working for. So I don't know exactly if she got the land from him. Most likely she did, because based off of one of the wills I seen, it looked like somehow or another she got released, and she ended up getting land, and she ended up incorporating her mother and it looks like her sister, and then they had like a couple different kids and everything that were there as well with her. And this was in the 1860s. The 1870s is normally where you would see a lot of melanated people now on the census with their actual names, instead of it being as a check mark next to like an age. So she was on there before that. Now, I did a little bit more research as well too on that side after I found out about Solomon, because it's a little bit easier to find information on the Caucasian side than it is on our side, because for one, we didn't control that media. They didn't allow us to basically read and write. Because actually English and stuff was actually a foreign language. Like, it's just like trying to tell somebody to speak Italian or speak French if they never spoke it before. Like, if it's something new to them. Like, okay, whatever, y'all can write whatever y'all want on there. We wouldn't even know, because we don't speak that language and we don't read that language. So it's, people can write whatever they want. So I ended up doing a little bit more research on the Betton line, on the Caucasian side, and ended up seeing that Solomon ended up marrying Lucinda Mercer. Lucinda Mercer, she was the daughter of a prominent Virginia planter, which came up with the Marlborough Plantation in Virginia, which was a really big area. And her grandfather was actually the lawyer to George Washington. His name was John Mercer. Well, I have to look and see. Yeah, his name was John, and I don't have all the information with me right now, but his father was the lawyer, George Washington. James, that's what I was thinking. James Mercer was Lucinda's father. John Mercer was his father. And also, John Mercer, was it James? James Mercer actually married Catherine Mason, which, if that name sounds familiar for the Virginia area, he was actually George Mason's, she was actually George Mason's aunt, which coincidentally, they actually raised George Mason because his father died on the Potomac River, and at that time they did not allow the mothers to really raise the child, so they needed a father figure. And John Mercer of Marlborough Plantation, or it was either John or it was James. I think it was actually James that actually was his basically place. So they basically raised him, and he had actually the biggest library in Virginia at the time. So where George Mason did a lot of his studying, most likely was in his library. You know what I mean? So a little bit of food for thought. But the kicker is, with all the stuff I started finding out with Walter Plecker and everything like that, into the stuff making a lot of sense, because whenever I discovered Lucinda Mercer, and I was looking on the George Mason website, the genealogical website, they had all of her brothers and sisters listed, her father listed, but they did not have her listed on there. So I ended up calling up Gunston Hall, which that's where they had the website and everything, and they were like, "Oh, okay, we'll bring you your information." And the lady's like, "Oh, yeah, she's definitely one of theirs. I don't know what happened, why she's not on there." And then she said that it was going to get done. And then a week or two later, I looked on the website. The information wasn't on there yet. So I called back, and they were like, "Well, she no longer works here anymore. There's another person that took her place named Mark." So he came from the Virginia Society and ended up stepping in. Long story short, me and Mark went through some rounds, basically, and needless to say, at the very end, he ended up parading me through the dames. Basically, he didn't think I knew that. That's what he was doing through the back room. There was a board going on, and they were like looking, and he poked me through the window. Through the door. And later on, he ended up saying, "You're right. She is part of the family." And I was like, "Yes, I know that." But the part I used to, me and him, we used to go with heated conversations, heated battles. And I was at the fact that with George Mason and Lucinda Mercer basically growing up together, even they were cousins, basically being brothers and sisters, because he used to be over there all the time. I was like, he probably went to her wedding to Solomon Betton. I was like, she was probably on that, and I was like, I will find the list of their wedding and probably prove it to you. So I think that's probably the part that actually broke the camel's back whenever I ended up hitting him with that, because I hit him with stuff from the William and Mary quarterlies. I hit him with stuff from the Rapinoe area newsletters and stuff like that. Got a book from from her uncle, which is Charles Fenton Mercer, which is actually there's a lot of stuff in that book as well too. But I was hitting them, and they couldn't do nothing but give the truthful information. And then later on, I ended up finding out that they ended up taking the whole genealogy site off of the website. No longer on there. Even to this day, you could even go back onto the Gunston Hall website and look and see if you see it. It's not even on there. And this was like 10 or 12 years ago. I knocked it off. Brought up the information. So with Walter Plecker, basically, kind of being a catalyst for the ones to basically take American Indian and make them black, basically on the census, through the Virginia Society. And basically any families that were related, any of the Caucasian families that were related, or the colonial families that were related, they kind of scrubbed a lot of the stuff and left things off. So that's most likely why Lucinda Mercer was knocked off of their list. Matter of fact, I could probably honestly say that's probably why she was knocked off the list, because they had known that she had melanated descendants. So, a little food for thought. It's about doing that research, not just looking at what people tell you. You have to do your own research. What they're telling you in schools and stuff like that is not the truth. Not the truth. What you have learned from your grandparents, the stuff that were around during the beginning part of the 1900s or even the 1800s, if you were lucky enough to speak to them, and they say that you have Indian in you, honestly, you do have Indian in you. You better stop taking words of other people. Don't even take my word. Do your own research. I've done it. I've seen it myself. But what they're teaching us in schools and our kids, they're not giving truthful information. It's very skewed. Very, very skewed. To the point where even like TV shows and stuff like that don't even depict our people. And it made it a little hard for me, because even I knew that we were American Indian because I was getting the information from my my upper parts of my family, like my uncles and my grandparents and stuff like that. But I'd never seen it on TV and stuff like that. So it kind of made it a little bit harder for me as a kid to even realize it, because I'm like, well, none of these people even look like us that they're depicting as Indian. Like, I don't understand this. But now I'm a little older, and then I started doing a little bit of research, and good thing with the internet, it brought a lot more information out there and got a lot of people that do have or did have real information out there, like truthful information, like the illustrations and stuff like that. Now they're able to show it. So it's more readily available to actually see what the true American Indians look like. And they did not look like what they show. Those are Native Americans. Those are the ones that came from the Bering Strait. They're the ones that found our people here in the Americas. Found our pyramids here. You know, found our way of life. You know? And I have had a lot of them tell me that. Truthfully. Just as I had people that are from Africa tell me that they've been trying to tell people this for years, but they got tired of trying to tell people this because people are so I can't even think of that word, but they're so point on saying that they're from Africa and they're not. So they basically just said, I just give up, so it is what it is. But I just had to get this out there.